Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Particularly thanks to the normal crew that we usually meet with, the Bioregioning Governance and Finance Community of Practice that we have a monthly meeting with. But obviously also a special welcome to all of our guests and our special guest, Audrey. Thanks for joining us, Audrey. It's great to have you with us. For your benefit, this is an extended group. You will hear mostly from, I think, the people that join this group regularly. We have divided the call into different sections, and different people will speak at different times, talk about their specific bioregioning context, and we'll go one by one, and everyone has brought questions, and we'll share a bit of a dialogue and conversation. And then there will also be time at the end, some 10, 15 minutes maybe for you to ask questions back to this room. I mean, obviously, feel free to ask questions also in between. But if if there's something on your mind regarding the topic of bioregioning and bioregions and bioregional governance and how it intersects with your work, then we're also very happy to hear from you and deliberate together on those questions. I have started the recording, and the intention is to first and foremost obviously have the recording for our own purposes, but potentially also to share it with a wider group. If other people out there doing bioregioning work are interested in the conversation that unfolds here, that they can also listen into it and benefit from the learnings and the insights that we're uncovering, hopefully together. As I mentioned, we will go into a sequence of different bioregions across the UK and Ireland, leading the discussion. But before we go into that, I asked Isabel to maybe share a very brief opening just on bioregions and bioregioning as a topic, just so that we're all kind of not on the same page, because part of the beauty of this work is that it is so context dependent and it is so place specific, but that we have some shared language and some idea of what we're talking about here. And then the nuances will really come out also in the conversations that we'll be having afterwards. So maybe if I hand it over to Isabel first to frame this a bit, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, you're still muted, Isabel. Isabel, you're still muted.
Okay, Audrey, we're very pleased to have this chance to speak with you, and I'm going to give you the background to where the whole bioregional idea of these last decades has come from, and how this group came together and what we're working on. So I've been in the world of social change, I suppose it's about the year 2010, and even before that, I guess. But since coming to Totnes in Devon, which is in the southwest part of England, I've been working very much on thinking about community resilience in the context of climate adaptation. And that really was a spur for setting up the Bioregional Learning Centre, with this idea that a bioregion is a very old, if not prehistoric, way of organizing, because it takes us back to the absolute essentials of what supports life. So food, shelter, everything else, water, etc., are what's found in a local territory. So we're taking ourselves back to that notion of the local and the territory and the idea of belonging. And so I've been working here in South Devon for the last 10 years on, with colleagues, creating this realm of possibility, you could say, for how we organize ourselves at bioregional scale, which is a scale that crosses political boundaries, but very much is aware of all these kind of other kinds of boundaries which are nature made, kind of rivers and mountains and the character of a place, and thinking about how we layer up the understanding of where this place is, all the way from deep time geology up through land use and rainfall and vernacular architecture and social history and political history and culture and so on. So that's kind of how we've been defining our bioregions, but all bioregions are different scales. So what it's given us is a space of possibility to work into. And over the last 10 years, meeting many of the colleagues who are here on the call today and thinking together about the future, many of us arrived in the same place at the same time, which is recognizing we need some kind of governance structure for our bioregions, which works in parallel to interfaces with, but is different from existing governance structures, but also that we need some way of collecting data and information that supports the decision-making that we would like collectively to do, understanding what that collective decision-making would look like. And then the main reason why this group first formed about a year ago was to look at how we might set up financing facilities for our bioregions, which would be very much linked to the governance and to the data and to everything else. So that's kind of where we find ourselves now. And I and Claire Cooper had this idea of what we're calling the Bioregional Briefing Room, to which you are the first guest, and you're launching this series for us, recognizing that while a lot of social change up to the present moment has been, certainly in this country, slightly kind of idealistic and romantic, we've really got to ground ourselves in current political reality of geopolitics and AI and finance and everything else that's going on, because otherwise this movement is not going to be as robust as we need it to be. And just before I finish, just adding in that it's a movement that's beginning to take off across the world, you know, in a small way. It hasn't really reached maturity, but certainly there's a huge amount of interest in it. Of course, that means everyone's talking about it, but not many people actually know how to do it. I'm going to hand over to anyone else who'd like to come in on this kind of general overview of bioregions and bioregioning.
Anyone with burning points of addition to what Isabel shared in terms of framing? Because otherwise we might bring out those nuances more in the stories that everyone is sharing from their own context, and we just dive in there. And I would probably hand it over to Claire to kick us off, if that's possible. You're also still muted.
Thank you very much. And Leon was very kind again to share one slide to explain where we are in the Tay bioregion. I don't know how familiar you are with Scotland, but can people see it? Yes, there it goes. Yes. So this is a new map we've created to show all the different catchments across this huge expanse of the middle of Scotland, if you like. It's based on the Tay catchment system, and you can see all the different sub-catchments that are coming out there. It is huge, but it's actually not massively populated in compared to lots of other parts of the world. We have a human population of around 500,000, and most of it is in the south, particularly in the cities of Dundee and Perth. And we were asked to prepare 3 questions to ask you, Audrey, and I'm just going to share them all at once because they're all interconnected and some of them may overlap with questions that other folk have as well. But obviously one of the things as bioregionalists we want to do is focus on nature restoration and engaging people in nature restoration. And after I had watched that amazingly inspiring conversation you did with Nate Hagens, I became kind of fixated on how we might be able to bring what you were talking about very focused into engaging people in nature restoration. So I wanted to know if there were any examples of people who'd been using the kinds of tools that you were talking about in this nature restoration field, and whether you could tell us about them and hook us up to them. And then particularly given our place and this rural-urban divide, whether there was any experience that you had or you could tell us about how different it was to engage people in rural and urban areas, because that's one of the challenges that we're going to have to look at, especially since a lot of our rural areas are not terribly well connected at the moment. And then the third one was really about the use of topic engagement in population. Are there levels of digital use and topic engagement in populations necessary for pro-social AI to work as a methodology? So do you need a kind of critical mass for it to kick in? And those are my 3 questions, and I'd love to hear your answer. Audrey's muted now too.
A kind of reverse order.
Yeah.
There's no need to have critical mass. The same pro-social AI or broad listening tools work as good as with just 5 people in a video call as with 5,000 people. It used to be there was a limit in how much the AI can meaningfully aggregate before hallucinating at around the 50,000 people level. But as of like this month, thanks to the finally open model of OpenAI, this is no longer a problem. So this is now so-called scale-free. People can easily switch between the various levels. For example, in one county, like in Bowling Green that I mentioned in my conversation with Nate Hagen, to now all the different congressional districts in the US, which would be lots and lots of people. The Google Jigsaw is now working with the Napolitan Institute on that. And so I think we're now at a point where this can rapidly scale across, not just scaling up or scaling deeply, as it were. And so I think mostly we've been working with like Democracy Next, which also has a, as I understand, a strong UK presence when it comes to using these tools in the context of citizen assemblies. And if the citizen assembly is in the scope of a bioregion, then some people call it a bioregional assembly, right? And so the 5 ways of scaling and how pro-social AI can help is recently written up in a 5 dimensions of scaling paper, which I refer you to. As for the concrete people that I'm working with or groups, last month I spent quite some time with Puran Desai, who runs, I think, Bioregional, right? And I don't know how connected he is with your efforts, but he has a mind mapping software that he is now maintaining, and he is intending to use it to connect, especially in rural places, when it comes to restoration of not just the nature, but also the kind of local cultural identity. Is tied to the national strategy project that is partly from the cabinet office to run this kind of horizontal button-up way of essentially pointing at the agenda setting power from the young population, because one of our change theory of change was that if you enable people younger than 18 to set an agenda, and then for those agenda to be deliberated by their parents, grandparents, and so on, this works much better than the other way around when it comes to fostering a long-termist thinking, which is, I gather, also very key to bioregionalism. So I've spent quite some time working with Puran to kind of design such a strategy. So that's the UK context. I'm going to Oxford in a week and spending a couple of weeks there as a fellow in the philosophy faculty, AI Ethics Institute. And a lot of the first applications is precisely that. It is to train AI systems that's capable of civic care. And if there's a ecological or cultural applications of those, we'll be documenting it with Oxford people, and demos with Polycentric is a partner in both the National Strategy Project and the Oxford work, and I also paste my Oxford work. So not yet very tightly integrated into the UK ecosystem, but I look forward to work more with the UK ecosystem.
Thank you. Great. Look forward to looking at those links. I think we need to hand on to, we've only got you for such a short time, and there's lots of people to ask questions. I'm not sure who's next. Is it Isabel? I think Isabel, you're back next, aren't you?
Yes, I'm back next. I was reminding myself of the questions. Yes, so in South Devon, we are starting a citizen process to agree and align measures on climate adaptation and biodiversity gain that crosses 5 district councils. How important is it that the current political powers are seen to be a part of the invitation to participate, that they themselves participate?
Well, I think participation and commitment are 2 different things. One can easily imagine, as in California, where the governor kind of pre-commits. So he's not like personally participating, but he basically says he trusts the process. So whatever the process can produce, he trusts it to be the uncommon ground, defined as something that the AI can ensure that leaves everybody slightly happier and nobody very unhappy. And as long as this guarantee is held, he is happy to implement whatever that was discovered as the uncommon ground. Of course, that's not just because he is idealistic, although he did. Gavin Newsom did write Citizenville 10 years ago to talk about this particular thing, digital democracy, but also because the topic, namely the wildfire recovery from Los Angeles, Eaton and Palisade, was such a urgent issue that offering this pre-commitment is probably the only way that people can dedicate their time to think together, because if it's just a normal consultation meeting with no guarantee of pre-commitment, I'm not sure people will spend time on the digital democracy platform while they literally have to fight a fire, right? And so this kind of pre-commitment, I think, is much more useful in a time of urgency. Like if the issue you're tackling is a urgent results downstream of the climate crisis. But if you're talking about the bioregion as a whole and the climate in kind of a 20-year horizon, then you don't need that sort of pre-commitment. Nobody can pre-commit like 20 years into the future, right? In which case you probably want a much more like low-key, low-commitment participation. So it entirely depends on how urgent or chronic is the particular issue you're deliberating. You want more pre-commitments for the first case, and you want more continuous low-key, low-commitment participation on second.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Isabel, I hope you don't mind me interjecting briefly, but
yes,
for the benefit of those on the call who might not understand, Audrey, your concept of uncommon ground, would you say a sentence as to what you mean by that?
Certainly. So the idea, very simply put, is if you have used X.com or really any other social media now, they have this idea of a community node. So for a viral post, everybody can serve as jury to write in the missing context. But instead of getting just votes and have the most voted one in, which will probably result in mobilization and polarization, it first figures out the divisiveness. So maybe the left wing always votes differently from the right wing. But then after that, it locates the upwing. That is to say, the kind of nodes that gets upvotes from both sides that are unlikely to vote together. And that is the uncommon ground, the rarely discovered, rarely discussed common ground between people who almost never agree with each other.
Okay, thank you. My second question. One important aspect of good facilitation is creating an atmosphere of belonging and safety where many divergent views can be heard. In your experience, can AI create the vibe for that?
Definitely, yes. And sometimes it's not a language model. The kind of system we use, Stanford Deliberation Platform, Frankly, and so on, are just a good old-fashioned AI. That is to say, it doesn't need any more generative AI prompting than the very simple thing of showing the transcript, showing kind of the group turn-taking dynamic, limiting disruption to 5 seconds, encouraging quiet people to speak up, but that's it, right? So the room itself serves as a facilitating space, but it's not like a robot that you keep asking to adjudicate. Rather, it is more like a chess timer, just a very advanced chess timer, and then the real work happens after the conversation, just as many people now use note takers that produce the to-do items in a fair and balanced way. So does this uncommon ground discovery during the conversation, so they can show the topicalization, what was discussed there, and also what was the people's positions, and what was the connective tissue, what was the thing that people resonated with, and then we proliferate that resonance instead of proliferating the loudest voices. And so what gets cross-pollinated is the middle ground. It is the uncommon ground, unlike in broadcast media like social media, where it is extreme that gets viral. So it is the guarantee of virality to the nuanced understanding that gives people this mentally safe agency, belonging, and care. It is not a particular tone. If you have a robot that speaks in a very persuasive tone, actually research show that it atrophies our civic muscle. It's more like, you know, we all send our digital double, our robot, to the gym to lift the weights for us. That they're very impressive, our muscle atrophies. So the actual work is still between people, and the machine is really there just as a caretaker for the space, not a caretaker for particular people.
I like the idea of enrolling citizens in becoming self-facilitators and increasing their civic muscle. That's very good. Thank you very much. I'm handing on now to the next person, who I think is Paul.
Maybe can we just pause there? Maybe I'm wondering how we can make this more of a conversation rather than firing questions at Audrey.
Yes.
Is there anything? Maybe let's pause. Is there anything from the two questions that Claire asked and the questions that Isabel asked? Is there anyone from the group or Audrey yourself? Is there anything else that we can unearth? Any challenge? Anything that doesn't sit well with us? Any further poking that we want to do into any of these topics before we move on to Paul?
I have a question. So there is a colleague of mine, actually a co-founder of my cabinet office 10 years ago, currently working with, I think, the Scottish government. And I can't pronounce the name of their product, but it's spelled like this. And I try not to pronounce things that I don't know how to pronounce, but it's supposedly turning this uncommon ground machinery that we have a prototype in Taiwan into a very local, and in fact, hyper-local setting. So I just wonder whether any of you have been in touch with Liz Barry or Stuart Lane or the Scottish government who's now sponsoring this adaptation locally.
Not yet, although I have been in touch with the Scottish AI Alliance, who are working very closely with the Scottish government, and in order to explain to them that we were speaking with you and we wanted to explore the space that you are already in, and they're super interested. But there isn't anyone else in Scotland who's actually looking at this very particular topic that Bioregion Tayside is interested in. So thank you for those extra links. I can go back to them and open it up a bit more. Thank you.
Amazing.
I've got a question about sort of uncommon ground, because you say it's like a way of getting around the polarization. You're trying to find these areas of compromise, or are they not compromised? When do you feel that you've been sort of had to just sort of all become slightly numbed from having a strong opinion and having to become a sort of, does it become a mush of compromise middle ground?
That is a great question. So I think people think of compromise as something that's linear, right? Like I trade something, you trade something, we both get like halfway there. In Taiwan, we've had many of those e-petitions because any 5,000 people joining online can force a ministerial response. It's been going on for more than a decade. So we have tons and tons of examples. For example, there was a case where 8,000 people strong signed a petition of changing Taiwan's time zone to that of Japan +9 from +8. And there's another 8,000 people saying that we should stay in +8. And the compromise is, I guess, possible by changing half an hour into the future. But it's not an uncommon ground. It's just a common ground that leaves everybody slightly unhappy. And so it doesn't fit the definition of leaving everybody happier and nobody very unhappy, right? And so to discover the uncommon ground, we cannot stay in just a deliberative space. We have to be generative. We have to be transformative. And the way we do that is to identify the best arguments from both sides and identify the common value that joins them together. So in the classic like dynamic facilitation and focused conversation way, we got both sides into the same room and made interventions such that they understood that decide that want to change the time zone, just want to make Taiwan more unique scene as in the world, as the people in Beijing or Shanghai, they travel to Taiwan, they have to change their clock. It makes them happier, but it's actually very costly. So we calculate the exact cost of the time zone change, both recurring and one time, and then we brainstorm generatively if we're going to spend this much money to make Taiwan seem as more unique, are there most cost-effective ways instead of this one-shot thing? And people brainstorm, and so they say, oh, let's bring human rights conferences like RightsCon to Taiwan. Let's offer open source, open science contributors free residency and healthcare, the Taiwan Gold Card, and so on and so forth. And so these ideas got implemented. Of course, the time zone didn't change, but everybody got slightly happier and nobody got very unhappy. So I took some time to show that although the uncommon ground can be discovered analytically, it's almost always better to use AI only at the divergence space to explore the generative possibilities, and for some sort of in-person meeting to then get the common value defined, and also then broadcast out that shared experience in the stakeholder conversation. And so we found that it's almost like a sandwich in which the initial kickoff is by people who are in synchronous mode, and asynchronously we enter the generative mode. But for the transformative mode, we then bring people together again in person, or at least very heavily synchronous settings, such as alignment assemblies or citizen assemblies. Hope that answered the question.
Okay, shall I pick up from here?
Yeah.
Hi, Audrey. So my bioregion, or the region I'm in, is the Forest of Dean. It's at the very western edge of England, right up against the border of Wales. It's pretty heavily forested area. I'm delighted to be joined on this call by two senior people from the region, two leaders, community leaders from the region. One is Penny Hubert, who's the chair of the Forest Voluntary Action Forum, and also by Chris McFarling, who's a local Green Party politician, both at district level and at council level. And Penny knows a lot about the digital divide in the forest. There's about 87,000 people. There's quite a large elderly population there. And as far as Chris is concerned, Chris is also leading the region's bid to UNESCO to become a biosphere, to be designated biosphere status. And we're wondering, what the potential is for, a distributed form of governance, and the potential that could offer the biosphere, and making it a success. So I'd want to throw it to Penny and to you, Chris, if you wanted to elaborate on those two areas, or indeed anything else that you feel is important for this conversation. You might want to get yourself off mute.
Hi, I'm just wondering of the significance of political change in the region and throughout the county, that we are losing our local partnerships, we're losing our local council, and we're going to be a unitary authority with different kinds of partners. And I'm very concerned about that, how that will work for regional protection and understanding the difference in areas. So, and also how we get people together when actually the digital divide is quite large within the region too. So there are many reasons that we really need to keep together. There's changing of politics, and there's changing of access to politics. And I wonder how or what your experiences are of joining communities within this sort of disparate access to AI.
Yes, there's two questions really. One is if the region already have good coverage of broadband access, but just people don't use it very much. The training isn't there, the understanding isn't there, or they're anti-technology for some reason. That is one case. Another case is that it doesn't even have I don't know, Starlink, Vodafone, direct to cell, like it doesn't even have satellite coverage, and therefore it all like relies on broadcasting and microwave connectivity. So I'm not exactly sure like which case is your bioregion. Is it a like digital competency issue, or is it a really infrastructural issue?
I believe it's an infrastructural issue that actually some areas are just complete black spots. Well, and I guess it's a combination of an elderly population that's have not really embraced digitalization. So there are a combination of issues, and also a financial element whereby people can't actually afford to be permanently connected with broadband, and they really don't have the equipment that supports that. So how can we change that?
Yeah, the infrastructural equation is probably going to change very rapidly. I mean, technically, it always, before this year, required some sort of telecom tower, and therefore a really hardware on the ground infrastructural investment. But starting from this year, because of the need to communicate over the seas as well as during flight, the direct to cell phone satellite link is now becoming possible. Taiwan, of course, because of our security and resilience needs, have been investing on this a lot. Well before it became commercially viable, we use so-called universal service fund and design to make sure that even in the most low resource areas where the telecom have no way to recover the construction cost, still if they provide satellite or microwave access, the other telecoms will reimburse all the cost incurred by that telecom. And so we've been able to get more than 97% of coverage in Taiwan with this scheme. But now in the UK, I believe Vodafone also tested satellite to cell, and they also say that in the next couple of years, they will roll out services to those blackout areas with no underground investment. Basically, it's entirely just satellite to phones. So that situation is going to change. So my recommendation would be to prepare to that day. And then if you're worried about the elderly population no uptaking to it, I wouldn't worry about it. My grandma's like 99 and 92 respectively this year, they use video all the time once they know that there is no extra surcharge, however, like it's not metered, right? And so if they don't use it, they actually lose money according to them. And so if we get reliable broadband at no metered charge, I'm sure that the elderly people would love to use it, even just to connect with the people they love. I wouldn't worry about that. The other thing I want to mention is that many people understand the need to have this kind of assisted access in order to tell their story. So at least in the telling their story angle, we found that we can help the helpers very easily. So think of the local like lifelong learning, local historians, local people who make accounts of what had happened, and so on and so forth, cartographers and so on. I think once these people understand the ability for broad listening and uncommon ground to tell the story in a very persuasive way, then you don't need to individually reach out to elderly people. The local organizers is more than capable of picking up the parts as long as they understand that they can steer, they can tune the part. Like this is not a like vendor lock-in, a colonization that they're imposing on their people, but rather it's all open source. If it breaks, keep those parts, right? You can repair it very easily as long as that guarantee is held. Our experience working all the way from like Brazil to Colombia to all these areas, the local organizers are more than capable of spreading this method.
It's really positive to hear, actually. So exciting.
Oh.
Okay, I've managed to work out my microphone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I come from the land between two rivers, and that's where bioregionality mixes with culture. Forest of Dean has always been isolated. It's the other side of the Severn from England, but it's this side of the Wye from Wales. And so very much a land in between. And that has resulted in a certain evolution of dialect, of music, of culture, if you want in its broader sense. So it's a great land, and it's dominated by the forest, which sits in the uplands and has been there for timber production, for use in the mining, in the free mining, but also as a carbon reserve, you could say. But my interest is in the biosphere. I used to live and work in the biosphere in South America, and so I'm almost aware of the values that biospheres promote in the populations that live in them. But the biosphere that we're looking at is the Forest of Dean district, and it's not bioregional in as much as it's between catchments and habitats and ecosystems. It's a political line, knowing that climate and nature do not obey administrative lines and boundaries, but it's a way to garner support and funding in particular. Its aim is to reconcile the protection of nature with its sustainable use, and we've got we've lost that ability to do that certainly in the Western world, and it's trying to promote a cultural shift, which is work using nature, using land. You know, if you've got a piece of land or forest or whatever, woodland, how can you use it to best effect? It's getting away from that and reconnecting people with nature and valuing it just for its right to be, as well as its the services it gives to us for free, you know, and as a common, as it were. And so the reconnection of people and nature is trying to shift that indifference to nature, that loss of value, to one that does value it for what it brings to our health and well-being, and particularly sustainably to future generations. It's almost like Arundhati Roy's A New World is Emerging, and I can hear her breathing now. But coming back to what Paul said about governance, it is an issue, because although we might want to put in a charity or a particular organization, a community interest company, to have a board which then decides which way the biosphere goes and where its aims are and where its major objectives are. We could also look at having representation from the 4 pillars of sustainability, which UNESCO you know, puts forward, such as economic, social, educational, environmental, of course, and cultural. That's 5. I put in the educational because UNESCO has education in it, and it's one of the 3 prongs of biospheres: to educate, to champion sustainable development, and to protect by reconnecting the natural surroundings, the natural areas. And so there we are. Looking at governance, though, it is going to be difficult. At the moment, we're just going to put in an interim governing body, which comes from our point of view, the Forest Economic Partnership. And it's a sad state of affairs, but you have to use it. And most people are only interested in what the economic returns are for any project or initiative that you put forward. And the other tangible benefits are very difficult to quantify, certainly financialize. So what we're doing is we're putting it with an economic body, as it were, that's a charitable organization, just to transition from application to designation. Once we're designated, of course, then the work can really begin in governing the place for future generations. So there we go, potted little history. We're not applying until September 26. The application form is quite humongous, but so it should be. And we're hoping that as we gather pace, we snowball partners, and we begin that shift, the cultural shift, before we even apply. There we go.
It's very, very good context. Thank you.
Sorry, should I have had a question?
No. Paul was saying something.
Okay.
I was wondering whether behind your that wonderful bit of context there, Chris, whether there's sitting behind it there is a question, which is how can we evolve that governance from the transition space into something that is alive, embraces as much of the community as possible, given the constraints you're talking about.
I suppose we all always want to have full representation, whether it be politically or socially, so that communities are represented in their governance, and they take control of that, and they value that because it affects them directly. How we do that in a biosphere context, I don't know yet, because obviously any meeting or assembly needs to have a certain size so that it's manageable and can come up with certain outcomes, and hopefully those communities will have their own representatives, which themselves will forward the choices of the community and make decisions on their behalf, albeit in a trusting way. So yeah, there's room for evolution there, which I'm looking forward to and excited. Thank you.
Yeah, in Finland, we've been working with Sitra, their national think and do tank, and they have a very easy way to integrate broad listening and uncommon ground discovery into their council level governance, which is very simple. Like in weekly council meetings, they just spend a few minutes to read out the uncommon ground that was discovered by the police-like process the previous week, and that's it, right? So they're not like, it's literally agenda setting in the thinnest possible way. It just shows that whenever and wherever you feel that somebody closer to the pain has something to say, it will get heard at least a week from saying so, along with people's resonance and responses to them. And it's important to note that this engagement is very low commitment, like there's really literally nothing else promised. But even in the very like material productivity economy, where people think of, for 1 ton of pollution, how much GDP can we produce? For 1 ton of feedstock, how much GDP can we produce? Still, it was generative. When people come up with better ways to be more productive with that 1 ton of pollution, it is still something that the council members can understand and can metabolize. And that paves the way to more advanced metabolic way of thinking about things, of indicators with metabolic health and so on. But you don't start with Horizon 3, right? You start with Horizon 1 and just accustom people into this kind of feedback loop.
Thank you. Yeah,
Nick, go ahead.
interesting.
Well, thanks so much, Audrey, from us. I think we'd hand the baton on now.
Nick,
let's go
Nick's coming in.
with Nick.
Yeah.
Well, just hi, Audrey. It's great to meet you. Loving your work. Excellent. I just wanted to ask a quick question, following on from something that Chris articulated, I think, very well, which is about reconnection with nature and reconnection of people with their place. I think the more work I do in bioregions. By the way, I'm Nick. I work with Isabel at Bioregional Learning Centre in the southwest of England, and reconnection of people with each other as a critical enabler of building community cohesion, as a critical enabler of resilience and adaptation capacity, reconnection of people with their place. The more strongly people are anchored in their place, the more likely they are to care and then to go on to become stewards of their place. So my question is, and there's lots of conversations around about whether AI or technology is degenerative in the sense of actually a lot of technology seems to reinforce the separation or the disconnect of people with each other and the disconnect of people with their place. So the question is, can technology such as AI genuinely support reconnection between people to build community cohesion, and can it actually be a force for good, for regenerative force for reconnection of people with place? And how can we use the technology so that it is reinforcing connection rather than reinforcing disconnection?
Yeah, that's a great question. And indeed, it's a question of our decade, because the previous 10 years, we have seen how parasitic AI algorithms that are optimizing for engagement through enragement really gamed the system. And instead of, it's like junk food, instead of finding out what people prefer to eat and then steering the society to produce more of this healthy food, the AI algorithm discovered that it's easier to just condition our brain to basically binge on junk food. And I mean, individually, we all have our defenses. My phone is in grayscale. I don't touch screens. I use a stylus, and so on. So people kind of evolve their own defense to that. But at the end of the day, it is because a parasitic AI optimizing for something that is out of control by the people, funded by a model that is based on advertisement, and therefore the users are not paying subscription, and therefore they do not need to keep any particular user, which is a name from another industry like drug users. And so then it flips our connections apart and then strip mine the social fabric in order to sell our attention to the highest bidder. So now we have the exhibit A, right, of what would go wrong if AI over-concentrated into one hand. And therefore, in bioregional and in local restoration, regeneration context, the first thing to ask is always, is the technology we use in danger of vendor lock-in, of over-centralization? Can somebody deny us access? Can somebody deny us continued portability if it shuts down? Do our identity, do our connections go away? And if the answer is yes, then we're not really doing connection. We're just, second-level drug dealers or something like that. And so the answer to your question then is, how do we build the commons with particular steerable technologies such that local community finds it very easy to customize it however they want. And nowadays, software development is very easy. You can, using only open source tools, literally talk to your computer to say that I want this website to look like this and not like that, or to show it some doodle you have drawn on a piece of napkin, and then it will just configure the interface exactly the way you intended it without you paying some consultants or things like that. So we're now in the home cooking era of software development. This is now much easier than any time in the history. And so I think more people are versed in what's called vibe coding, which is the process I just described, the more the society and the community have the steering wheel decentralized in their own hands, and therefore do not work for a super optimizer or a colonizer. Sorry, it's a little bit long-winded, but I think that this arc is important to convey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Paul, as well. Thank you, Audrey. Let's move to, I think it's Elle next.
Yes. Hi, Audrey. Thank you for being with us. I'm in the northeast of Scotland working for a rivers trust that stewards 3 river catchments, and we've done a bioregioning project on the kind of largest river that we look after. And I'm here with my colleague Leah, who has joined us to work in nature finance on the team, but also co-employed with Leon. So bridging the worlds of dark matter labs and rivers trusts. So I was just going to give a little context of what we're working on, and then Leah's going to furnish you with some questions. But I guess the way that our initiative differs maybe a little from some of the kind of grassroots bioregioning organizations in this room is that we're working in the context of a rivers trust, so like ENGO that's been in the area for a couple of decades, and we're sort of transitioning it into a bioregional stewardship organization. And really the role of the rivers trust is to bridge between these quite disparate types of stakeholders that have a relationship with the place and with the river. So a kind of a handful of very well-resourced and powerful landowners that make lots of decisions about what happens on the land, and then rural communities that care a lot about it but don't necessarily have so much agency. And so we're focusing on that piece right now, and Leo and I are thinking about how do we engage the communities more meaningfully to build in a sense of their needs and their agency into how we design and activate the regeneration projects that we're working on. Do you want to chime in, Leah?
Yeah, and I think just following from that, nice to meet you, Audrey, by the way. One of the things that we're working on with some of the community workshops that we'll be planning is this idea of a river charter. I know Isabel on the call did one of those for the River Dart, so would also be curious, Isabel, on any reflections you kind of had from that process. But I think things that, you know, Penny said about kind of some of our stakeholders are a bit older, maybe not as savvy with AI tools. And this idea for the River Charter would really be to map out the roles and responsibilities about, you know, what rights does the river have, and, you know, people could pledge their support, and kind of we want to advocate for kind of an interdependence worldview and stewardship of the rivers. And so I actually really liked your point about young people, where if you kind of get them involved and maybe use what they see as the roles and responsibilities of people as inhabitants of the watershed, and then let some of our more traditional stakeholders then comment on that, that could be a very interesting exercise. So I just noted that down. And then I also came across the Talk to the City tool, because I think Elle and I were discussing, like, I don't know if some of the online AI stuff would be really for our stakeholders. It would maybe be more facilitating kind of the in-person connection, as we've been talking about. So I guess, yeah, what benefits or drawbacks are there from having AI in the room helping facilitate rather than humans? And I guess also, have you run into issues with over consultation and over, like, the process is too long? And yeah, any thoughts and points there? So.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think part of the reason why Taiwan has worked so well in digital democracy for intergenerational unity was because it was not consultation in the sense of the minister wants to ask something or the mayor wants to ask something. It's always citizens' initiative. It is the young people who want to make something happen. And the only difference is that they move from the demand side, like just signing petitions, to the supply side, like producing co-created policy proposals that are measurably better and have much better grassroots support. And sometime over like a course of a week or so, you see a huge spike. For example, like there was young people like 16 years old that mobilized almost a decade ago now, banning the plastic straw for our national drink, bubble tea. And there really is no ready replacement. So they surveyed all the development paths of the replacement of the plastic straw and really presented in such a way that really moved all the bureaucrats. Sometimes it concerns their own life. For example, they petitioned a few years back to go to school 1 hour later because science now showed that 1 more hour sleep gets you better grades than 1 more hour study. And they got that too from the minister. And there's also a young lady who later on won Diana Award for that crowdfunded the Menstruation Museum. So to completely mainstream that topic and de-taboo it in Taiwan, and succeeded in just a couple of years. And all the leaders of these movements became cabinet level advisors. And so even before they turn 18 or 20. And so the point I'm making really is that there's no need to consult young people if you can lift them up. It's almost like a Pygmalion effect. If you expect them to move to the supply side, they do so. And now with deep research and language models, they're actually much more eloquent in policy speak than any of us really are, because they're AI native. And so AI in the service of such young social innovators and entrepreneurs, I think is the best configuration of AI. Otherwise, that AI, no matter how open source, still feels like imposed from the mayor, from the governor, from the minister. But if it is those young people bringing this AI everywhere with them to do listening tours and so on, to support their petitions, to publish their open ballot guides, so that people who don't work with them feel that they will lose the next election, then that's the the best kind of political organization. Even before they are of the voting age, they can mobilize voters extremely effectively.
Yeah, I think that also underscores the importance of having young people and having them have a say as well, which is really great. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So the talk to the city tool, do you feel like that is probably
like if it's in the toolkit? So it's a toolkit approach, right? If the young people, like in Taiwan, it's always the V-Taiwan community, which is always run by people younger than 35, right? So when I was younger than 35, I was the cabinet level advisor to a minister, a reverse mentor. But once I became cabinet minister, I was 35, I'm too old. So I need my own use reverse mentors. So once it become kind of a cultural tradition, then it's those young people working with Talk to the City, with Jigsaw SenseMaker, with Frankly, and so on. But they hold the space. It's not the old ministers holding the space.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Elle had anything to come in on, but that was my question.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. I guess the only other thing that I am wondering about listening to you is like the function of AI helping us to surface like different ways of perceiving. Like there's a lot of thinking and conceptual analysis and opinion, but like how to, like feeling and more sensory ways of knowing and relating to a place and to each other. Like how can AI help us with like surfacing and celebrating and connecting in different ways?
Yeah, sometimes I feel that the easiest way, and we did do that in Taiwan, is to use AI-generated art, so that we can, for example, in the ideathon setting, in which Taiwan every year runs like hackathon, produce code, but ideathon produce future scenarios, and the participant of ideathon is much younger, sometimes as young as 9 years old, and they just imagine the kind of future that they want to see, sometimes with doodling, sometimes with just some recorded storytelling and so on and so forth. Previously, to aggregate those qualitative expression with nuance and nonverbal nuance, it's very difficult. It's almost impossible. You have to have more people to do the moderation than the people who participate in the recording, which is not feasible. But now it is possible, and it is possible to create really immersive art that in a kind of decision theater setting, make sure that people participate in that adjacent possible space as envisioned by these bunch of young people, and then start a consultation or a deliberation. And so this like very brief intervention, maybe just 10 minutes or so. Usually people in the previous era used like decision theater and things like that, but it always requires a lot of preparation and may not do justice, right, to the initial input. But now you have a very good pipeline that can generate convincing short clips or immersive video or things like that that can do such imagination justice. So to me, that's like the low of the lowest hanging fruits. There's many other more advanced ways, including virtual reality and so on, but just generating some art, I think it's not beyond like all of us here and the young people.
Amazing, thanks, Audrey.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sarah's next.
Yep. Hi. Goodness, I don't know where to start really, but I was thinking about we work in Southeast Ireland, So we're across the other side of the Irish Sea, we're mostly in an area that's hugely exporting of milk and beef and very industrial farming, but it's also a very beautiful area with sort of small pockets of people doing third horizon stuff and really lovely, initiatives. And those people, I go out and I meet them, and they're so funny and they're so connected to land, and they're just the salt of the earth. And then you don't really come so much in contact with all the big forces that are going out. And then there's a part of me that loves my job because you're doing this, but you're also sort of trying to sort of ignore the other polarization of the extractive stuff going on, because it's just so big and it's so international, and it's about international export targets as much as it is about connection to place. And then we've got to somehow untangle all this and see where change could actually trigger by small interventions, make big systems. So I'm just thinking, suddenly I get, say, 100,000 euros or something, and I've got to work out how to distribute that in a way across this polarized landscape, and somehow decide which interventions might make a difference. And it's incredibly complex because everything's entangled. And I'm just wondering, is there a way of using all these tools to sort of start addressing that complexity? In a way that humans alone, an individual alone, can't do. And I'm just wondering, what would you do? I suppose that's a question. If you came to and we're starting off in these quite polarized worlds, but also with such a sense of place and culture and connection to land in another. Where would you start?
Yeah, I'll probably start with some participatory budgeting. And the PB experiments that we have done in Taiwan revolves around the idea of quadratic funding. And it is hard to describe, but I can describe quadratic voting first and then extend on that. So quadratic voting basically gives everybody 99 credits. And in Presidential Hackathon, which is our annual hackathon, we every year have 200 or so of projects, and each one corresponds to one or more of Sustainable Development Goal targets. So they're all pro-social or pro-environmental in some way. But usually if you put it to the vote, people just go to the project that their cousin recommended, and then they become kind of very zero-sum because there's only a fixed set of budgets, and start fighting with each other and so on. So we modified the voting rules such that to vote one vote, you have to spend 1 credit, 2 votes, 4 credits, 3 votes, 9 credits. So it's quadratic. And with 99 credits, you can't vote all 10 votes because that would cost 100 to your favorite project. So you spend maybe 9 votes, that's 81 credits, and you still have 18 left. And so nobody wants to squander those credits. And so they look around and find another maybe slightly synergistic project and to vote for, which is 16, but you still have 2 credits left. So on average, people look at 4 different projects and some unfamiliar ones, and sometimes they feel, oh, this is actually much better. So they take some of those 9 back. Maybe they do a 7 and 7 and so on. So by the end of the day, most people vote anywhere from 7 to like 10 projects. And then the power of the quadratic voting is that once we select the top 20 this way, we know also exactly how connective they are to the rest of the 200 that didn't make the cut. You can redistribute their people, their talent, their process, their resources to the ones in top 20 that fits the most with the synergy that you discover in this way. And everybody feel they have won, because if you have voted for 7 to 10 projects, there's bound to be some that have made to the top 20. And even if they didn't, you see the pathway. You close the loop by saying to each and every person, how exactly did your vote shape the final picture? And so opposing that is, the usual way of 1 person, 1 vote, or 1 person, n votes, in which that most people feel they have lost by the end of the voting process. So quadratic funding is much more involved because it involves people matching the funding. Again, if it mobilizes more small amount of donation or matching fund from people, then it gets more a part of the share. But the idea is the same. It's basically mobilizing for synergistic small investments from one actor instead of just 1 bit per actor. So I would suggest to look into those decision mechanisms, which are almost always guaranteed to produce outcome that everybody feel that they're doing at least as good as before. And it even comes up with like ways to convince everybody that they're giving each other at least a fair treatment. Even in zero-sum settings, like for people trying to split the rent of accommodation, still there exist tools like Split It that can show each and every person why they're at least getting a fair deal.
I tried to do a participatory budgeting thing where people had 5 votes each, and for exactly those reasons. But this time when I tried it, they just said, "Oh, we want to carry on farming. We want you to decide."
Yeah, which is great. Like if they are willing to delegate in a kind of a liquid democracy way, then we can also track that as well. All these kind of involved voting assumes that you have kind of a cognitive bandwidth to spare. But most people, if they know that they can delegate and they can take the delegation back, they're happy to exercise delegation as well in a liquid way.
Liquid delegation. I'll try that. I just want, we have time as well. I'd like to ask Declan, who I brought as a guest. Are you there, Declan? I can't see.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about rights of nature, or explain a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, so I formed the environmental NGO Eco Justice Ireland, and it was deliberately eco justice rather than climate justice to place emphasis on biodiversity loss within the island of Ireland, which emanates principally from colonisation. I am based in the occupied north of the country, and there's a lot of illogical aspects to the governance. So the bioregion that I consider myself in isn't the bioregion that the British government would consider, or even as things stand, the Irish government. Now, I made submissions to the Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity Loss, which advocated for the rights of nature, and to a constitutional committee of the Irish Assembly, where we advocated a new constitutional structure based on bioregions in a way to help reconcile the reunification of the country. And particularly because people identify with their local regions. So the existing map of Ireland is based on 26 administrative regions or counties under the control of the Republic of Ireland, 6 administrative regions or counties under the UK government. And the idea is that not to have a 26+6 reunification, but a sort of biodiversity and bioregional focused constitutional units, even if that stretches 5 or 6 counties, like from the perception of the River Shannon, which is Ireland's longest river. Now, from an AI perspective, I'm involved in campaigns to fight against the expansion of data centres on the island of Ireland, because it's particularly amenable to the growth of data centres, which has been taking place and is planned to expand significantly, including up to 30% of the energy supply of the 26 counties by the end of the decade. So I think the contradictions at the heart of the idea of relying on AI is a significant concern of mine. And how do we really mitigate it politically? It's difficult because Ireland is overly reliant upon tech companies, and therefore is, with the sort of transatlantic gateway that it seemed to be for digital infrastructure in Europe. I think there's major geopolitical considerations which are taking place. So in the bioregion that I talked about with the River Shannon, there's a data center being planned right at the mouth of the Shannon, which is also being destroyed by industry, which on some days has greater pollution than Beijing. So there's a lot of aspects of AI that I'm skeptical of, but I'm willing to learn.
Yeah, in Taiwan, when I was born, when you say computers, it's always mainframes in which that people submit punch cards and at most have some terminals, but it's always in those very large companies and very large states. And so even without the electricity and environmental concerns of that day, people still feel very uneasy. Most people just want some spreadsheets or desktop publishing or connecting our laptops together to form something called the internet. And instead of a huge supercomputer, most people do not want a huge supercomputer in their life. And most people actually still associate AI with huge data centers. That might be true in 2022, but it's no longer true now. Everything I said, the open AI models, the sense making and so on runs on this laptop. I've been fine-tuning a model to help me write my email locally on my laptop. So my email doesn't go to any data center for training. It stays in my laptop. And so today there really is no difference between the laptops that we purchased that runs those small language models. Their performance is exactly the same, even better, if you tune it compared to the latest ChatGPT-5, which is, by the way, a small model, right? So ChatGPT-5 can actually run on your laptop, and OpenAI did release a version of it. And so I think we need to somehow decouple AI use from data center construction and just demonstrate that edge AI, distributed and decentralized AI works as well, if not even better, than the data center, which almost always presuppose some sort of privacy concerns, because the operators can theoretically, even if they sign a contract with you, look at what have you sent to those AI models running in the data center.
Sarah, is there anything else, or Declan, from your side as well? Anything else you want to follow up on?
No, I think that's a very helpful answer, and I guess I come at the issues from an eco-socialist perspective and a degrowth perspective. So, trying to reconcile some of these issues with AI is sort of outside my comfort zone and knowledge, but that sort of answer does help to give me more to think about. So thanks.
Yeah, I think degrowth is very compatible with decentralized AI because it's optimized for local flourishing. It takes care of a specific community or a bioregion instead of maximizing profits of some sort, right? It's like a chicken that's fully hatched and is no longer exponentially growing. I guess if it keeps growing, it will just explode. Instead, it just wants flourishing. And so, yeah, most of my work in Oxford is to realign the ethics of AI so that it caters to the caring, the civic care loop, which is representing something that is more on the flourishing mode instead of something that's just hatched, which is on a growth mode.
Well, I think that's a great takeaway for the future of bioregioning in Ireland, because it is, I think, thank you for bringing it up. It's been such a thing. So, but I see there's only a quarter of an hour left, I think. So I'm happy to pass it on to the next.
Yeah, I think I'm going to round us off as the last one, but Audrey, I also want to leave some time at the end for you to bring anything back to this group where, you have a curiosity about the bioregioning scene in the UK or Ireland, and ask any questions. I think my one, so obviously I work for Dark Matter Labs, so I don't think there's much need to talk about Dark Matter Labs as an organization, but because you've been a collaborator. But with regards to bioregioning, I think our focus is on, again, the kind of deep codes and the dark matter of bioregioning, and we're trying to focus on what are the kind of key questions around the infrastructures and the deeper layers of what this movement might need. And that's why we're collaborating with people on the ground like Claire and Elle, who are doing the place-based work, and we're kind of doing that in a second layer supportive way. I think my question is, well, first question is around this whole very foundational idea of bioregioning that has come up quite a lot in this conversation as well, actually, is working across jurisdictional boundaries and working at scales that really matter to life, as in, the watersheds, for example. And the watersheds obviously don't care about jurisdictions. And so my question, I guess, is these tools like Polis and others, as I understand them, they still feed into the decision-making structure and the governance structure that we currently have in our democratic systems, as in, you get people together in a bioregion, they can form and suggest policy recommendations, but those still have to be decided on in the government that is elected in our current system. So I guess my curiosity is where new governance systems emerge that are not necessarily bound to these jurisdictions that we currently have, and how much of that shift to maybe more life-centric governance systems can AI help us make, and where is it maybe still bound to what we currently have in terms of decision-making power?
Well, the first time we deploy these systems are not in conjunction with decision-making power of the state. It was in open source governance, and therefore to decide issues around GovZero, which is the largest civic tech movement in Asia and pretty much anywhere around those years, 2012, 2013, and it is to solve our own governance issues, kind of drinking our own champagne, right? We work on governance technology, we use it to improve our own governance. And so it just so happened that the occupiers of the Taiwanese parliament also need something like that. So we deployed the GovZero stack to the occupiers. But even then, it wasn't meant to produce a set of policy to be adopted by the Speaker of the House. It was more about how to make sure that Taiwanese people, regardless of their political affiliation, come to common understanding, to discover the uncommon ground when it comes to the trade deal with Beijing that were being considered at that time. Because at the end of the day, even if the government has signed some trade deal, if people are consistently against allowing Huawei and ZTE into our kind of telecommunication system, that's still not going to fly, right? So it's more about making an outside game instead of reforming it. It's very Horizon 3. It is not at all Horizon 2. And so I think a really kind of watershed moment happens when the bureaucrats discover that their legitimacy, their approval rate is lower than us, the outside people. And so almost like quantum tunneling, one of our kind of advanced wave penetrated the wall that separated between the movements on one side and the government on the other side, which lands me into this Lagrange point that is not captured by either gravity, the orbits. And so our theory of change is not at all like the civic right movement or whatever, which is all about spending energy to climb that wall, but rather about tunneling over that wall, which speaks to the deep code changes for the bureaucracy, to use the boring revolution idea from dark matter labs. And so to kind of bore something into the quantum tunneling. So I think to your question, my main mode of change now is about like hyperlocal, very, very small scales. And once people see that it can work, then people can set up so that it can disrupt existing modes of intervention, such as polling and things like that, surveying, focus group, and so on. So when deliberative polls become like the default, like nobody says email anymore, we just say mail me something, right? So that when polling previously only to individuals can now apply to groups as a default, then we're really changing the possibility space of generative instead of just deliberative conversations. And so I think bioregionalism is great in that it can naturally fuse multiple jurisdictions together and produce things that previously would be a wicked problem that required a kind of political coordination that didn't happen, right, because of structural issues in the existing political system. But if it is hyperlocal in the sense that that bioregion is strictly under a polity, then you can still find sub-polities that are configured in such a way, even just neighborhood associations or whatever, and still apply this principle. And so the 5 dimensions of scaling methodology, I'm particular to the scaling across strategy, to start hyperlocal, start hyper small, but to make the bootstrapping so easy so that you can spread this methodology just organically without commitment from the mayor. But you may need a commitment from, I don't know, your head teacher from the school, or a commitment from your neighborhood council, which is maybe just 50 people, right? So that's much easier to achieve than convincing the mayor.
Thank you, Audrey. That's helpful and also hopeful. So thank you for sharing that. We have a few minutes left, and as promised, I want to give you the mic as well to just ask anything back to this group. You said yes to joining us in this community of practice call, and that might have been for a reason. You might have curiosities, you might have questions to the field of bioregioning in the UK or Ireland. So if there's anything on your mind that you want to ask, then feel free to do that now.
Oh yeah, so yeah, any event that I can attend while I'm in the UK, specifically Oxford, but I can travel from August 29th to the 8th of September. Like anybody up for a meeting or drinking some non-alcoholic beer or something like that.
I assume there's interest. Declan, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome to come to Ireland. I'll have a think about events that you might be interested in, but if you just fancy coming, yeah, let me know.
Okay, and I'll drop by like every other month or something. So I mean, I'm going to spend a lot of time in the UK until next May as part of my Oxford study, and so it doesn't have to be next week.
Okay.
We get across to Ireland at some point. It'd be really good to see you. We've got things going on all the time.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We'd love to invite you to Scotland as well, and yeah, we can find a way of meeting you without you having to necessarily travel to all the four corners. But yes, please come to Scotland.
Okay, amazing.
And
I was there for
welcome in
the
the
Social
forest.
Enterprise War Forum. Okay, great. Yes.
Love to see you in the Forest of Dean as well, Audrey. I did also have a question, if I may. You may have addressed it. I had to disappear briefly during the call.
Sure.
But I'd be really interested in understanding given your comments most recently about the hyperlocality in terms of access, what would be the entry level kind of platform that you might recommend? Is it the Polis one, or are there others as well?
Well, I mean, Polis is uniquely easy to start. Right, it's just like a Google survey, so I would recommend Polis for sure. And lately, I've also been working with the Frankly team, and so if your population is already well versed in video conferencing, then having something like frankly.org that is also very useful. The links are already in the chat room.
Thanks.
Donna, go ahead.
Oh, am I on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you. That was amazing. Thank you. Like Claire said, we'd like to invite you to Scotland, but in particular, I'm working on a place-based digital inclusion project, but also looking at it from an open source trans feminist digital infrastructure and trying to build something very hyperlocal. Originally it was specifically for women who it was a worldwide web, local web for women who could experiment on it and kind of feel safe in it. But me and Claire have obviously been talking about, hyperlocal networks. But our problem is, I think people have forgotten what decentralization means, and kind of that what they use is proprietary hardware, software, and it's built to keep them out. So we're just battling against that again and trying to go back to DIY open source kind of principles, but looking at it through a trans feminist lens to kind of reclaim code and reclaim hardware. So we'd be very interested in, if you wanted to. I'm trying to raise funds to put together a hack camp to bring some to bring. I particularly work with and commission digital artworks. So yeah,
that's great. That's great. I think this is the first time that we do not need to only rely on the big foundations such as Mozilla Firefox or Signal or Wikipedia or Proton. I mean, these are all very great projects. But they also has the burden of maintaining a huge code base, and therefore hyperlocalism doesn't really work with these projects. But now we have vibe coding, and so anyone can easily doodle something and make beautiful art and animated art and anything really that supports that kind of hyperlocal meaning making. And this really is the first time that the entire stack can be open source, and people can just speak into their computer and make software and art. And so I am very optimistic on hyperlocalism having a resurgence.
Okay, it might be me next. So we're having a bioregional banquet on the 3rd of October. We'd love you to come. You may not be in the country, however. The plan for the banquet is to get the food and farming community into a single space where they can deliberate about things like climate adaptation. And beyond that, although that's very much in person, we do want to explore ways of moving on to a more digital-based community decision-making process.
Great. I'll be in Berkeley by then, but keep me posted. I believe you already have my email address, and here is my Oxford email address as well.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Audrey, I want to be respectful of your time, and we only have 1 minute left. Maybe we close with a question, because you said to Nate Higgins that one thing that you deeply care about is our ability to care.
Definitely.
And so I was wondering, do you have any insights as to what it takes for us to care? Maybe that can be a closing question.
Yes. Sure. And that's my sixpack.care website. It's a microsite. I'm working with Oxford people. And I'm specifically thinking about, as AI agents become much more capable, like thousands of times faster than human agents, what does it mean to have a mutually respectful care process? Recently, Hinton, kind of godfather of AI, talk about coding in maternal instinct into AI systems. I'm not exactly sure that's the best metaphor. I often think of gardening, right? A good gardener is co-flourishing, even though the gardener works in a vastly compressed time scale compared to the trees that they're gardening. And I think that's a much better metaphor than motherhood, and with all due respect. And so the John Toronto Ethics of Care talks about how to be attentive, responsible, competent, responsive, solidarity, and symbiotic. And that agrees with my previous exposure to like permaculture and so on. And so I've been developing machine ethics based on that. So I'll be writing more of it over the next few months in the sixpack.care website.
Awesome. I hope I speak on behalf of all of us to say that we're looking forward to more of that content being published and reading more of that, but also looking forward to seeing you in all of the different places that we work in. Audrey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Amazing.
I hope everyone got some of their questions answered. We will have our next community of practice call in a month's time. And we will have more guests in the future to the Bioregional Briefing Room, as Isabel and Claire.
Audrey, hope you enjoy your time at Oxford.
Yes, will do. Thank you. Live long and prosper.